Before we begin this story, tell us what time is it where you are and which country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Let's go. The year was 1985. In a quiet, unremarkable neighborhood, a mystery began to unfold. A disappearance so perplexing it defied immediate explanation. It centered around the Shaw family, a seemingly ordinary black family whose lives, one ordinary night, simply ceased to exist within their home. What made this case particularly unsettling was the absolute lack of any discernible disturbance. One day they were there, living their daily routines, and the next they were gone. Their departure left behind an unnerving tableau. The family car, an everyday fixture, remained precisely where it should have been, parked innocently in the driveway. Inside the house, the signs of recent occupation were abundant and poignant. Groceries, perhaps just brought home, still sat on the kitchen counter awaiting unpacking. There was no overturned furniture, no forced entry, no shattered windows, nothing to suggest a struggle or a violent intrusion. The scene was one of sudden, inexplicable abandonment, a chilling stillness that hinted at a story far more complex than a simple walkout. The initial assessment by authorities, faced with such an absence of evidence, leaned towards the unsettling possibility that the Shaw family had simply chosen to leave, to disappear entirely from their established lives, leaving behind all their possessions and their past. The initial police response to the vanishing of the Shaw family was characterized by an almost unnerving lack of conventional leads. Upon their arrival, officers found no forced entry into the home, ruling out a typical break-in or abduction scenario involving a violent struggle at the point of entry. There was also no evidence of robbery. Valuables seemed untouched, suggesting that financial gain was not a motive. The most perplexing aspect was the house itself, which remained eerily intact. It was full of the mundane signs of a sudden, almost instantaneous departure. Clothes still hung in closets. Beds were made. Personal items lay undisturbed. It was as if life had simply paused, leaving behind a perfectly preserved, yet utterly empty domestic scene. Adding to the mystery, repeated attempts to contact any other family members proved fruitless. Relatives and friends were as bewildered as the authorities, unable to offer any explanation for the Shaw family's sudden, collective disappearance. The absence of a note, a struggle, or any sign of foul play led investigators to a frustrating dead end almost immediately. This particular circumstance, a family simply gone from a house that showed no signs of distress, defied typical investigative patterns, pushing the case into an ambiguous and unsettling category. The complete stillness of the home, frozen in time with its everyday objects, spoke volumes about the abruptness of their vanishing, yet offered no answers as to the how or the why. The lack of any immediate evidence suggesting a struggle or abduction created a narrative vacuum that would persist for years, deepening the mystery surrounding the Shaw family's fate. With no immediate answers emerging from the Shaw residence, the investigation broadened, yet found itself continually stymied by a profound absence of leads. Authorities launched a comprehensive search, extending their efforts far beyond the immediate neighborhood, hoping to uncover any thread, any anomaly, that could explain the family's inexplicable disappearance. Officers began by canvassing the neighborhood with meticulous detail. They went door to door, speaking with every resident who might have seen or heard anything unusual on the night the Shaw family vanished. Questions focused on strange vehicles, unfamiliar faces, or any signs of commotion. Yet, the responses were consistently unhelpful. No one recalled anything out of the ordinary, reinforcing the eerie sense that the family had simply dissolved into thin air. Simultaneously, bulletins were put out to law enforcement agencies across the state and beyond, sharing descriptions of the family members, their car, and any known associates. The hope was that someone, somewhere, might encounter them or recognize them from the circulated information. The search expanded to include places of refuge and public spaces where a family in distress might seek assistance. Police conscientiously dredged local hospitals and shelters, checking records for anyone matching the Shaw family's descriptions. They contacted distant relatives, old friends, and former colleagues, hoping that the family might have reached out to someone in their wider network. However, Every lead evaporated into a dead end. No sightings or traces emerged. It was as if the Shaw family had collectively stepped off the face of the earth, leaving no breadcrumbs behind. The consistent lack of any corroborating evidence from these exhaustive searches only served to deepen the mystery. The initial theory, once a hesitant possibility, began to solidify. Suspicion grew that the family simply left matters behind, abandoning their lives voluntarily for reasons unknown. Without any evidence of foul play or external intervention, the narrative of a spontaneous, self-imposed disappearance became the most plausible, albeit unsatisfying, explanation available to investigators. The case, devoid of new information, began its slow, inevitable slide towards inactivity. The initial flurry of activity surrounding the Shaw family's disappearance gradually subsided. Without new leads or compelling evidence, the case, like so many others, began its inevitable descent into the archives of unsolved mysteries. The years slipped by, each one adding another layer of dust to the files and deepening the coldness of the trail. The vibrant memory of the Shaw family, once a topic of intense neighborhood speculation and media reports, slowly faded into a whisper, then into silence. Years went by. What was once a baffling puzzle became a poignant local legend, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones, or perhaps not spoken of at all as the community moved on. The Shaw family was officially declared missing, a bureaucratic designation that acknowledged their absence without providing any answers about their fate. The initial fear and frantic search efforts gave way to a somber acceptance. Neighbors, once vigilant, eventually ceased looking over their shoulders. Children who had played with the Shaw children grew into adults, carrying only faint, fragmented memories of their vanished playmates. The house itself, once a vibrant home, stood empty and silent, its windows like vacant eyes staring out onto a street that had largely forgotten the mystery it held. The mystery of the Shaw family festered, a quiet wound in the collective consciousness of the community, largely ignored as the exigencies of daily life took precedence. The case grew colder with each passing season, the threads of potential evidence fraying and disappearing, making any future breakthrough seem increasingly improbable. It became a file gathering dust, another unsolved puzzle in the annals of local law enforcement, a testament to the fact that sometimes people simply vanish without a trace. Then, after nearly a decade had passed, a flicker of life disturbed the long-dormant case. The stillness that had enveloped the Shaw residence for so long began to crack, not with a bang, but with barely perceptible murmurs. Around 9 years after the family's disappearance, a curious development emerged. Someone began to hear odd rumors about the abandoned house. These weren't concrete leads or eyewitness accounts. They were the kind of persistent whispers that circulate in tight-knit communities, fragments of local gossip that, over time, can accumulate a strange weight. Neighbors, who for years had merely glanced at the derelict property with a sense of melancholic familiarity, now began to report peculiar observations. There were mentions of muffled sounds, faint noises that seemed out of place in a long empty building. Some even claimed to have caught glimpsed shadows moving within the house, fleeting movements that could easily be dismissed as trick of light or imagination, but which, when combined with the hushed whispers, began to sow seeds of renewed suspicion. These were not the confident statements of a witness, but the hesitant observations of those who felt something was profoundly wrong. The accumulation of these subtle, unsettling reports eventually reached the ears of an investigator. Perhaps it was a seasoned detective who had never truly let go of the case, or a new officer reviewing old files. Regardless, the persistent rumors, however vague, were enough to spark a renewed sense of urgency. The property, long considered a stagnant dead end, suddenly gained renewed interest. An investigator decided it was time to return to the property for another look. This was not a reinvestigation driven by groundbreaking evidence, but rather by an instinct, a hunch born from the unsettling persistence of the rumors and the haunting memory of an unsolved mystery. This decision, seemingly minor, marked the turning point, the first tentative step towards unraveling a decade-long secret that lay hidden within the very walls of the abandoned home. The silence was about to be broken, and the truth, however shocking, was poised to emerge from the long shadow of time. The decision to revisit the abandoned Shaw residence, prompted by those persistent, unsettling rumors, proved to be the pivotal moment in a mystery that had long been resigned to the cold case files. The investigator, returning to the silent home after almost a decade, approached the property with a fresh perspective, no longer constrained by the initial conclusions of voluntary abandonment. This time, the focus was not on what was missing from the house, but what might be hidden within it. The initial walkthrough was likely methodical, a re-examination of every room, every crevice, every wall that had previously been deemed unremarkable. This renewed scrutiny was driven by the subtle whispers of muffled sounds and fleeting shadows. The investigator was searching not for obvious signs of disturbance, but for the subtle clues of concealment, the imperfections in an otherwise ordinary facade. The atmosphere in the empty house, which had once felt merely desolate, now carried an oppressive weight, a sense of something profoundly amiss. Each creak of the floorboards, each gust of wind through a broken pane, seemed to amplify the silence, sharpening the senses of the lone individual daring to probe its long-held secrets. The breakthrough, when it finally occurred, was not a dramatic explosion or a sudden revelation, but the meticulous uncovering of a deeply guarded secret. Investigators, perhaps following a faint hunch or noticing a slight irregularity in the construction, discovered a concealed entrance. This was no ordinary door, but a masterfully hidden passage, designed to elude casual detection. The entry point could have been ingeniously disguised, perhaps seamlessly integrated into a seemingly innocuous bookshelf, which, when moved, revealed a hidden void behind it. Alternatively, it might have been a cleverly constructed panel in a wall, its edges so precisely matched to the surrounding architecture that it rendered itself virtually invisible to the untrained eye. The location of this secret space was equally significant. It led not to another part of the house, but to a hidden room, most likely situated either in the basement or the attic. These were areas typically less frequented, places where sounds might be muffled by the very structure of the house, and where the presence of individuals could easily go unnoticed for extended periods. The discovery of this ingenious concealment immediately shattered the decade-old theory of voluntary disappearance, replacing it with a far more sinister narrative. The Shaw family had not left. They had been deliberately hidden. The moment the concealed entrance was breached, the full, harrowing truth of the mystery was laid bare. Inside the hidden room, after nearly a decade of unimaginable confinement, they found members of the Shaw family still alive. The scene that unfolded was one of profound shock and immense tragedy. The individuals found were in a state of extreme disarray. They were disheveled, their clothes worn and dirty, their hair matted, their bodies showing the unmistakable signs of prolonged deprivation. They were also desperately weak, their movements slow and uncertain, their voices hoarse from disuse and dehydration. Yet, despite their deteriorated state, they were undeniably recognizable. The faces of the missing, etched with years of suffering, were still the faces of the Shaw family, now hauntingly re-emerged from their living tomb. The discovery was a moment of agonizing relief, a convergence of horror and profound human resilience. The immediate aftermath of this discovery was a frantic scramble to understand and alleviate their dire circumstances. The sheer duration of their entrapment, nearly 9 years, presented an unprecedented challenge. How could a family survive such an ordeal, and what twisted circumstances had led them to this unimaginable fate? The revelation of their survival, locked away in their own home, opened a new, far more disturbing chapter in the Shaw family mystery. It transformed a perplexing cold case into a live investigation of abduction and forced imprisonment, demanding answers to questions that resonated with the deepest human fears of confinement and control. The silent house had finally revealed its captives, but the story of their entrapment was only just beginning to surface. The discovery of the Shaw family, alive but fragile, within the confines of their own home's hidden room, marked a dramatic and horrifying conclusion to a decade-long mystery. However, this revelation was merely the beginning of an even more complex and psychologically intricate chapter. The immediate focus shifted from finding the missing to comprehending the unimaginable ordeal they had endured and, crucially, to identifying the perpetrator of such a monstrous act of imprisonment. the question of how they got there quickly became paramount. The initial police theory of voluntary abandonment had been brutally debunked by the physical reality of their confinement. The presence of a concealed entrance, meticulously hidden from view, immediately pointed to a deliberate act of imprisonment. This wasn't a family who simply walked away. They were locked in, trapped by an unseen hand. The investigators, now faced with living victims rather than cold evidence, began to consider several chilling possibilities. Could it have been an abduction, where an outside force, perhaps with intimate knowledge of the house's layout, seized the entire family and secured them within their secret prison? Or was it the tragic escalation of a domestic dispute, where a member of the family, or someone intimately connected to them, had orchestrated this chilling confinement? The most unsettling thought was the possibility of deliberate imprisonment by someone close, a betrayal so profound it defied comprehension. These were the scenarios that now guided the renewed investigation, turning the focus inward, towards the family's immediate circle and their past relationships, searching for the individual capable of such a heinous act. The condition of the Shaw family upon their rescue was a harrowing testament to their prolonged ordeal. Physically, they were profoundly impacted. They exhibited severe malnourishment, their bodies emaciated from years of inadequate sustenance. Weakness was evident in their every movement, their muscles atrophied from disuse and lack of proper nutrition. Immediate medical emergencies were apparent, stemming from chronic dehydration, vitamin deficiencies, and the countless other ailments that arise from such extreme deprivation. The sheer biological toll of almost a decade without proper light, fresh air, and sustenance was immense. But the physical suffering was compounded by an equally devastating psychological toll. Their mental state was one of deep confusion, their minds struggling to process the sudden shift from prolonged confinement to liberation. They exhibited clear signs of possible psychological trauma, including disorientation, profound emotional shock, and an understandable difficulty in articulating their experiences. Years of isolation, fear, and the constant struggle for survival in a confined space had left indelible marks on their psyches, requiring extensive and delicate care. The moments following their discovery were a whirlwind of urgent action. First responders carefully removed the family from their cramped, dark prison. Every step was taken with extreme caution, mindful of their fragile physical and mental states. As they emerged into the daylight after so many years, the outside world must have seemed alien and overwhelming. Immediately, medical personnel attended to their urgent needs. Dehydration was addressed with intravenous fluids, malnourishment with carefully administered nutrients, and the immediate shock of their rescue was managed with gentle, calming intervention. Their rescue was not merely an extraction, but the first critical step in a long, arduous journey toward recovery and reintegration. The subsequent phase of the investigation centered on gathering the crucial information from the survivors themselves. The family, still in the throes of recovery, began to share fragmented details of their imprisonment. Their memories, though often incomplete or disoriented by trauma, slowly began to piece together the narrative of their capture, revealing who did it and why they were captured. These were not coherent, linear accounts, but rather snippets of memory, flashes of terror, and impressions of their captor, painstakingly extracted by compassionate interviewers. The questions were agonizing. How had they survived? What desperate measures did they take to stay alive for so long in such a confined space? What did their captor do or not do to maintain their imprisonment? As these horrifying details emerged, police action became swift and decisive. Authorities immediately initiated an intensive investigation into the imprisonment itself, dedicating significant resources to tracking down whoever orchestrated it. The case transformed from a missing persons file into a complex criminal investigation of abduction, unlawful imprisonment, and potential assault, promising to bring the full force of the law against the perpetrator of this unspeakable crime. The story of the Shaw family, from their inexplicable vanishing to their miraculous and horrifying rediscovery, serves as a powerful and enduring reflection on the hidden dangers that can lurk within the most ordinary lives. As the narrator concludes, the mystery's shocking twist reveals a depth of human malevolence that defies easy comprehension. The trauma endured by the family is unimaginable, a testament to their resilience, but also a somber reminder of the long-lasting scars inflicted by such an ordeal. Yet, amidst the horror, there remains a persistent thread of hope of justice, a collective desire that the perpetrator, once identified, will be held fully accountable for their calculated cruelty. The case stands as a chilling cautionary tale. It encourages viewers to stay alert to oddities in their communities, to trust their instincts when something feels amiss, and to recognize that the most profound secrets can hide behind the most unremarkable facades. It also implicitly asks for continued public interest, encouraging viewers to follow updates on the case, as the full truth of the Shaw family's imprisonment might continue to unfold long after their physical rescue. This narrative is a stark reminder that what appears to be an abandonment can, in fact, be a deliberate act of imprisonment, and that sometimes the most terrifying truths are hidden not in far-off lands, but within the very walls of our own homes, waiting to be discovered after years of agonizing silence. The Shaw family's story is a chilling testament to resilience, betrayal, and the shocking secrets that can lie dormant for a decade, waiting for the slightest whisper to bring them to light.
Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more.